Hi everyone, today I have some hot school and work lunch ideas in the Mom Bento Element Bento Box, as Mom Bento have kindly sponsored today's video. You can use this for either cold or hot food, and to prepare it for cold food, first fill it with cold water, or for hot food, since it's not microwavable, fill it with boiling water, place the lid on, leave it to stand for 30 seconds, and then press the button in the lid to release any steam. Empty out the boiling water and immediately fill it to the top with your hot food, then place the lid back on quickly to ensure you don't lose any heat and make sure that it's on as tight as possible. The Element Bento Box fits perfectly in the Mom Bento pochette bag along with the Mom Bento cutlery sets, so it's great to take your food on the go with you. So onto the lunches, and Monday's lunch, or just idea number one, is a tempeh pot noodle. For this I took a block of tempeh. I recently found this by the tofu brand in the supermarket, and I just sliced it up into rings and then cut it up into cubes. If you don't like tempeh, you could make this with tofu or even some seitan. I then made a marinade in a bowl with 1 tablespoon of sesame oil, the juice of half a lime, 2 teaspoons of soy sauce, a teaspoon of dried chili flakes, 1/4 teaspoon of ground ginger, 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne pepper, a small pinch of ground sea salt, and a large pinch of ground black pepper. I then whisked that all together until it was nice and smooth. Once it was well combined, I then added in all of the cube tempeh and then just turned it all through well to coat every piece of tempeh evenly. And after giving it a good mix through, I then covered the bowl with a reusable wrap, and I just placed it in the fridge to marinate for 15 minutes. So this could be made up in advance the night before. I then also peeled and finely cubed a small carrot and also sliced up a spring onion, and then after 15 minutes I then placed half of the marinated tempeh in a hot pan and just fried it off, turning it over continuously until it started to brown and turned slightly golden. It was around 15 minutes. Then to put the lunch together, I first heated the Element Bento Box with boiling water and emptied it out. Then placed in a handful of fresh spinach, a nest of ramen noodles, the chopped carrot, the chopped spring onion, the cooked tempeh, and then over everything I just poured in a cup of boiling vegetable stock. I then quickly added in a bunch of fresh coriander and a wedge of lime, then immediately put the Element Bento Box lid on and screwed it on as tightly as possible. This is like a much healthier version of an instant pot noodle, and it is just so easy to make. When it comes to lunchtime, after squeezing the lime juice over everything, it's good to give it all a good mix together. This also just distributes the heat through it all evenly and obviously gives all the flavours a good stir through each other. And you could make this with anything you like. Like I said, instead of the tempeh, you could use this with cubes of tofu or seitan instead. You could use fine rice noodles instead of the ramen noodles like I used here. And as well as, or instead of the carrots and spring onion, you could add some red or green peppers, some pre-cooked mushrooms, but these are just what I prefer to use in it. The carrots don't need cooking, but the heat is enough to soften them slightly, though they still have a little bit of a crunch, and the stock is enough to just cook the noodles through. It's such a great thermoflask style lunch. Tuesday's lunch, or just idea number two, is a creamy roasted red pepper pasta pot. You can make the sauce the night before, and for this I heated a tablespoon of oil in a pan. I then added in half a roughly chopped white onion, as well as a sliced clove of garlic, and I fried those off until soft. I then added in a tablespoon of tomato puree, 1 teaspoon of paprika, and a 1/4 teaspoon of chili flakes, seasoned with some salt and black pepper, and then I just fried that off for another few minutes. I then transferred the onion and garlic mixture over to a blender, and to that I then added in a 340 gram jar of roasted red peppers, which I had drained off and then roughly chopped into pieces. I also then added in a cup of plant milk. You could use whichever you like, but here I used oat milk, and then I blended that on high until it was smooth. I then transferred half of the sauce into an airtight jar and placed that in the fridge. To the remaining sauce in the blender, I then added in a handful of fresh basil and blended it again until smooth. I poured the sauce back into the original saucepan to reheat it, and once hot I added in a portion of pre-cooked penne pasta and then just warmed that through, so you could do this part in the morning. Once hot, I then filled my Element Bento box with hot water for 30 seconds and emptied it out to heat it up, then added in the pasta and finished it with some chopped fresh basil, then immediately placed on the lid as tight as possible. This is one of my new favourite go-to pasta sauces. It's so quick and easy to make and tastes incredible. You could obviously make this with whichever pasta you like. You could stir through some spinach as well, add in some olives or some chopped sun-dried tomatoes. You can miss out the red chilli flakes if you don't want it as spicy, but the sauce itself is so creamy, really rich in flavour from those delicious jarred roasted red peppers, which are such a great cupboard staple for me. I use them in so many things as they're so versatile, really cheap to buy, and already have all of that roasted red pepper flavour packed into them without the hassle of having to roast them yourself. Wednesday's lunch, or just idea number 3, is warm tempeh noodles with a creamy red pepper sauce. I started by cooking off the remaining marinated tempeh left over from Monday's lunch in a pan on a medium heat for around 15 minutes until it had started to brown. I then placed that in a dish to keep warm whilst I then heated the remaining creamy roasted red pepper sauce left over from Tuesday's lunch in the same pan. I then added in a nest of cooked ramen noodles. These actually only need to sit in a bowl of boiling water for 3 minutes and they're done. I then spiralised a courgette into courgette noodles and also spiralised a carrot into noodles using a handheld spiraliser. And then I added both of those into the pan before gently turning it all through the sauce. The courgette and the carrot noodles really don't need long at all, and once it was all just heated through well, I then transferred it over to the Element Bento box. Again, I had heated this up first by filling it with boiling water and then emptied it out. To that I added in the cooked tempeh, and finally to garnish I chopped up another spring onion, so I added that on top along with some coriander and a lime wedge. Again, as quickly as possible, I just placed the lid on as tightly as possible. This is a great way to use up the remaining tempeh or tofu, whichever you decide to use for this, as well as the remaining creamy roasted red pepper sauce. This is so versatile. It works great as a pasta sauce, but also for stir fries, or in this case for these noodles. Again, you could add whatever you liked into this. You could throw in some extra veggies if you wanted. Some peppers, mushrooms or onion would all work really great. You could use whichever type of noodles you wanted. I love doing the spiralised courgette and carrot noodles. It's another way to sneak some more vegetables in there. It's healthier and it's lighter. I find an all noodle dish can be quite heavy, especially at lunchtime, plus they give it a little bit more texture. Thursday's lunch, or just a fourth idea, is a smoky bean and jackfruit chilli hot pot. For this I added a tablespoon of oil to a pan on a medium heat. I then added in 1 tablespoon of tomato puree, then a teaspoon of chilli powder, a teaspoon of smoked paprika, half a teaspoon of cumin, half a teaspoon of onion granules, half a teaspoon of garlic granules and a quarter of a teaspoon of cayenne pepper. I then took a can of jackfruit, drained it off and emptied it out into a bowl, and then using 2 forks I just roughly pulled it apart. I say roughly as when it cooks it just falls apart anyway. I then placed half of that in the pan, covered the other half and stored it in the fridge. Then I also added 1 can of drained mixed beans to the pan, half a can of chopped tomatoes, half a small can of sweet corn, a cup of boiling water, then seasoned it with some salt and black pepper. I gave it all a good stir, brought it up to a boil, then placed the lid on and left it on a medium to high heat for around 25 minutes, stirring occasionally until the liquid had reduced down and everything had cooked through. After warming up the Element Bento Box by filling it with hot water, then emptying it out, I placed the hot chilli in it, topped it with some coriander and a lime wedge, then immediately placed the lid on. This is the easiest one pot meal for this Element Bento Box. Literally everything just gets thrown into one pan and it does the work itself. You could do this in a slow cooker too, but it could be made up the night before, then obviously just reheated in the morning so it's nice and hot, ready to go in the Element box. Again, after squeezing over the lime juice, it's good to just give it all a turn over to mix everything through and distribute the heat properly. As you can see, the texture of the chilli is perfect. You could just make this with the beans, but I find the jackfruit gives it a bit of substance, and the way it just falls apart when cooking and soaks up all of those amazing flavours is just incredible. If you wanted, you could put some pre-cooked rice or some pre-cooked quinoa in the base of this. I find it perfectly filling enough on its own though. There's so much flavour, and for such a simple and quick one pot recipe, it really is delicious. Then Friday's lunch, all the final idea is a creamy Cajun jackfruit pasta. For this, I first heated a tablespoon of oil in a pan on a medium heat. I then added in the remaining half of the white onion left over from Tuesday's lunch used for the creamy red pepper sauce, which I just sliced up. I then added in a teaspoon of Cajun spice mix, half a teaspoon of paprika, half a teaspoon of garlic granules, and a quarter of a teaspoon of cayenne pepper. Then I also added in the remaining pulled jackfruit left over from Thursday's lunch. I added in the remaining half a can of chopped tomatoes, also left over from Thursday's lunch, as well as the half a can of remaining corn left over. I then poured in 1 cup of boiling vegetable stock, added in a cup of dried whole wheat penne pasta, then added in a good pinch of salt and black pepper. I stirred that all through together well, then brought it up to a gentle boil, placed the lid on and left it to simmer for around 10 minutes until the pasta was almost al dente, giving it a good stir halfway through just to make sure that it didn't stick to the bottom of the pan. I then removed the lid and gave it a final stir before then adding in half a cup of oat milk and a small bunch of fresh parsley. I stirred those through and continued to cook it until the pasta was al dente. Then again, I'd preheated the Element Bento Box by filling it with boiling water, emptied it out, and then I placed the creamy Cajun jackfruit pasta in it. And then on top, I just chopped some more fresh parsley, so I sprinkled that over before then placing the lid on as quickly as possible so to not lose any heat. This is another super quick and easy one pot meal which works great for this Element Bento Box as a hot lunch to take on the go. You can make this all up the night before and then just reheat it ready for the box in the morning. The Cajun spice mix gives it so much flavour and the plant milk just makes the sauce really creamy. The pulled jackfruit has such a great texture and works so well as an alternative to meat. After cooking it, it really does just fall apart. You could add more into this if you wanted. Some cooked mushrooms and peppers would work great. You could also add in some spinach too. You could really mix this up in so many different ways. And that's it for another week of school all work hot lunch ideas. Don't forget to check out Mom Bento. There's a discount code and link in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you again soon. Bye!